how do we navigate things like cultural trends, current world events, and disagreement in church? Honest Conversations is a deeper dive into some of your important questions that we don't always have time to cover in a Sunday morning service. Ready to dive in? Let's join Andrew and Brooke for today's Honest Conversation.
Honest Conversations with my pastor. Diego Ramos is normally behind the camera.
Producer Diego.
Producer Diego. He is mastermind of all things audio, visual, graphics.
We appreciate you, Diego.
We do. We
Appreciate
love
you guys too. This is
You
a great,
are so talented,
great show.
and we're so thankful. And I just realized my mic was not where it was supposed to be. Hey, this is a bonus content for all of our Honest Conversations with my pastor's listeners. And we wanted to bring Diego in because he and Andrew have had conversations in the past over one of our prior episodes on guns and self-defense in our Violence and Virtues series. And we wanted to bring Diego on because he holds a different opinion from Andrew. And they've talked it out, they've hashed it out. And so, Diego, thanks for coming and being willing.
Unless he's been convinced by these previous
Unless
conversations.
he has been convinced.
Okay, no, he hasn't.
No, we wanted to bring him on and really offer an opinion that some of you might hold as well, and just give voice to that different side of things. So, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start here. You were here when we filmed the guns episode. Are there any issues that you were like, yeah, no, as far as topics that we touched on or answers that Andrew gave?
Yes, for sure. I feel like one of the things you majored on was a sense of justice, doing what's right, protecting people, and how like those are good things. And I would agree with you on those things. And I think we should protect people, but I think we should probably not do it in a way that's likely to be lethal because it just feels unnecessary. So I would agree with all the things, like we should totally protect people. And I think another thing you said is like we shouldn't be passive in those situations where people are in danger. Totally agree. Let's not be passive. Let's be proactive. Let's be intentional with our choices. But like, how do we protect people? How do we maybe disarm somebody or incapacitate them? I don't know.
Yeah.
You can hit them. Like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm fine with fighting.
So you're not a pacifist. You wouldn't label yourself a pacifist.
Right.
Okay.
So to me, there's a time where fighting is okay and dealing some damage when you need to, especially to protect people. But I think killing people just feels way wrong. And to me, it feels like, I feel like in Scripture, it's sin. Yeah. So definitely be intentional. Yeah. Definitely protect people. Definitely do something.
Right.
Don't be passive.
Right.
But like, don't probably lean towards an option that'll probably kill them because that just like
So you think
that didn't need to happen.
Killing somebody is a sin in your view. You would say yes, that is a sin.
Yes.
To kill somebody.
To clarify, I think this is an upcoming episode, or I don't know if it already came out with the capital punishment.
Yeah.
I think Scripture's pretty darn clear. Like, there's a lot of reasons why that should happen. So, like, when it's exercised by a judicial system, it's like, okay, God gives very specific parameters for that.
Interesting.
So that I can't argue with that. It's like it's cut and dry in Scripture,
because
in my sense.
God said that, and also the government said that, and the government's an appointed authority to be able to make that decision.
Sure. The government's opinion matters to me less.
Right. But the government is the one who's going to carry out the capital punishment.
Sure. Yeah. So within a judicial system with people within specific roles and authority and systems, it's like there seems to be a time and place for that.
But you're saying
I think their parameters should probably strictly follow what's in Scripture.
Right.
And if not, then that's on them because I think there's a lot of specifics that are given in the Old Testament there. And it's like, if you didn't follow that, then I don't know what you're doing.
Right. So you're okay with capital punishment, you think is on the table because God said it's on the table.
Mainly because God.
But what makes capital punishment is that the government does it.
Right.
So therefore, the government is an essential element in that. And so part of the reason you're okay with capital punishment is because the government's doing it. And
I would hate to personally carry out that role. I would never want to be that person.
Well, so you wouldn't.
But God, I feel like, makes room for that.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to be the executioner, but you're also saying it's not right. It wouldn't be right for any private citizen to go after somebody and execute somebody and call it capital punishment because it's not.
Yeah, I don't think that's my place.
Yeah, I agree.
And then kind of going back to a war thing, you had these 3 criteria from, was it Aquinas?
Yeah.
I can't remember all of them. One of them was essentially a specific leader or authority has to be the one to wage
right
war.
authority,
It can't just be
like a
like a random
sovereign
person.
Yeah.
That one makes perfect sense to me. So that one I agree with. The other 2, I would say I probably disagree with, which had to do more so like the motive or the,
Can we
like,
go, hold on.
you
So
have to have a good
before we
reason.
go to war,
Yeah.
can we go back to, can we talk about the things that you brought up?
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just trying to distinguish from self-defense. Like,
Yeah.
here's how I feel about this. Here's how I feel about this
Totally.
real quick. Now let's talk about
Oh,
the
okay.
main meat and potatoes. But
Oh, okay, great. Then carry on.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll follow you where you were going. That's good.
Yeah. So those 3 criteria, I agree with the first, has to be a legitimate authority.
Okay.
The other 2, it has to be a good reason. To me, is just too vague. It's like, who am I to know what a good reason is? And I think in the Old Testament, you see God obviously being okay with certain wars taking place or Israel participating in certain wars. So I think there's definitely some wars have to be okay because that's just like, unless you're not reading the Old Testament at all. So I feel like that much is clear. So you can't really get around that. But I feel like God is really the ultimate person who can decide which ones are okay and which ones aren't, or which ones you should or should not participate in.
Correct.
So it's one of those issues where it's like, I don't think we can decide what's a good reason. I think you need to go to God with it. And if he tells you it's a good war, you do it. If it's not a good war, you don't do it. Now, we're governed by secular governments and all sorts of stuff. But I agree with the authority needing to be the one to carry it out, which is why I feel that way about capital punishment.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we are wise enough to be able to discern or determine what is a good reason ourselves.
For capital punishment?
Or for war.
Okay.
Because I think that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, waging war on a country is a massive deal.
Totally.
And yeah, I don't think we're smart enough to know what is truly a good reason.
Okay. So what's the meat and potatoes?
Well, the meat and potatoes, I believe we were talking about self-defense and guns, right?
Yep.
Well,
which things should we discuss?
What would you like to
Self-defense or war?
discuss? Self-defense, I would say.
Great.
Because I feel like not self-defense. I feel like war and capital punishment are like pretty cut and dry from Scripture.
Okay.
And honestly, I kind of feel that way about self-defense too, but that's where there
Okay.
seems to be more of a gray area.
Okay. So war is cut and dry, even though we can't know what a good reason to go to war is.
Yeah.
So what's cut and dry about it?
What's cut and dry is that God is the only one who can decide what's a good war.
Okay. So, but we can't know.
I think we can know if he discloses that to us,
Okay.
but we can't just like figure it out and be like,
So are there like principles of reality and truth and peace and stuff like that that are just true because they're real, that if those are broken, those are inherently, God's inherently spoken to that thing?
Not necessarily, no. We have
Okay.
our free will, and
So like if somebody...
everyone's free to wage war for all the wrong reasons, and I think that
Right.
happens a lot of the time.
Yeah, totally. But we're talking about what are right reasons. Like,
Sure.
are there any inherently right reasons for a military to be in battle against another military?
Yeah. I haven't probably gone to like all the different kind of scenarios in my head, but I would probably say no.
Okay. So like if some country invaded the United States, that would be like man, we really need to pray about if we should fight these guys or not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think
My dad's in the Army.
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, so I agree war's complicated.
It's complicated.
And well, what is war? War? Well, I'm kind of with you. War's not that complicated. Somebody dies and somebody lives.
It's
So
a
not that
it's a
complicated.
mass scale conflict.
Governments are complicated.
Yes.
People are complicated. Relationships between nations and allies, like those things are complicated.
Right.
And that's messy, and I think that's where things get,
Super
like we talked
messy.
about, super foggy and kind of like, what's the truth, who's telling the truth, all those sort of things. So as far as it pertains to like specific wars, I think it's pretty complicated.
It's really complicated. Yeah.
So, and it's frustrating because I think that there are basic common sense this kind of comes maybe into some of the self-defense stuff, but I think there's some common sense things that maybe don't cover everything, but there's some common sense stuff that's like, yeah, that's when a military would react. That's like, yeah, if we got invaded, if any country gets invaded, the military is probably going to try to fight back. It's like,
it's kind of their job.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
And again, it's an official established authority and
it's like
system.
totally
so
good
it's like,
reason.
okay, that's your job. You signed up for it specifically, knew what you were getting into.
Yes.
You've made that choice. If you're going to act in that role, it's like, great. I'm not going to tell you not to.
Right.
Or tell you that the military is evil.
Element of just war saying this is a right reason. It's like getting invaded. Fair.
It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's
but
some of those
again,
things, but geopolitical relationships are not that cut and dry.
Yeah, and I would say
which is
my main
frustrating.
view historically, just looking at all the past wars or even current ones,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know if God thinks this is a good one or not.
Right.
I just don't know.
Yeah, totally.
So I don't look at wars and saying like, oh, all of them are so horrible and shouldn't have happened. It's like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
No, I'm with you on that.
I'm probably most of them didn't need to happen.
Yeah,
but,
right. Totally.
I just feel like it's something we can't know and it's something for God to know.
So is this where this translates into self-defense, where you're coming from the standpoint of, I don't know exactly what the motive of this person who, seems to be attacking me is. Like, it's not up to me to.
It doesn't matter what their motive is. I'm responsible for my actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go expand on that.
Regardless of their motive, I'm not going to kill somebody. I don't think, to me, it's weird that to me, when it comes to self-defense and guns, we kind of often categorize in our minds kind of like a good guys, bad guys scenario. And I feel like we do this really specifically with self-defense in areas where we don't do it with like anything else. And it's interesting
Like what?
to me.
Give an example of a place we don't do it.
Stealing, like, oh, that's a good guy stealing versus is a bad guy stealing. Like, that's okay stealing, or this is.
Oh, no, but sorry, you're saying because killing is bad, period.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Unless carried out within a legitimate authority that's
Right.
informed by Scripture, which
Yes.
may or may not happen all that much. I don't know. But yeah,
Well, can we pause on that? Because I think that's kind of what you brought that up with capital punishment. That's sort of the reason I was asking about the government thing, because capital punishment, you're like, biblical, I see it. God gives it as right punishment. He tells government.
Talks about it a lot.
Talks about it a lot. Like, it's there.
It's there.
Totally get that.
Yeah.
And you're saying the same thing for war. Capital punishment obviously involves killing.
Yep.
War involves killing.
Right.
So killing isn't inherently sinful.
If God told you to go to war, or if when
Right.
someone does this is what you should do, then you listen to God.
Yeah.
But I don't know, in self-defense, you can make the case, oh, well, God told me that it was okay to take this person out. I feel like that doesn't seem reasonable to me or to
Right.
make any sense.
So I think there's a little bit of nuance in there. That's like, the goal isn't, like, the inherent goal of defense isn't to kill somebody.
I think if you're using a gun, I think you know what you're getting
so
into.
if you're using a baseball bat and somebody dies from their injuries, did you sin?
No. Well, okay. And here's why I feel that way. There's I think you maybe referenced it, a scripture in Exodus or Leviticus or something that talks about essentially like if someone comes into your house and attacks you, and if you strike them dead, if it's nighttime, it's okay. If it happens during the daytime, not okay.
It says it says if it happens in the night, like, you will have no blood guilt, and then it says if the sun has risen upon them, there will be blood guilt.
Right.
And there's no consensus about what exactly that means.
Right.
But that's what it says.
It's a little confusing.
Right.
The only distinction is it's light and you can see better, or it's
Right.
dark and you can't see. So I think, to me, what I gather from that passage is that what makes the nighttime scenario okay is it could certainly be accidental if you can't see well. So to me, if you are just defending somebody or defending yourself and you accidentally kill them with a bat or whatever, to me, you can know that their motive wasn't to kill them. And that, I mean, it was accidental. But to me, it's like if you bring it to a situation, a gun, and then you defend someone and you're like, well, it's not like I wanted to kill them. It's like, but you brought a gun.
What about a knife?
Probably a similar, I don't know. A knife's probably not the most effective thing to use. So I know there's
Why isn't it effective?
It's very small, so you have to be close range.
So it doesn't cause enough damage.
No. The range is where it becomes impractical.
Okay. So a baseball bat is good range.
No.
But you said you fight hand to hand,
Sure.
which is less than a knife.
Yeah.
Okay.
But a knife is definitely way more lethal.
Okay, so don't use a knife. Fists and baseball bats are game.
I
But if
probably
you-
wouldn't use a bat
somebody
either.
dies. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I think you use what's around you.
Okay.
I probably
but
wouldn't
not
like
a gun or a knife.
I probably wouldn't prepare. No, I wouldn't use a gun or knife.
Okay.
I wouldn't prepare in advance by carrying a gun or knife with me.
Okay.
If I were to go out of my way to want to be prepared for such situations, I would have like, I don't know, a taser or something or a tranquilizer gun. If I really, really cared to that level of like, I want to be prepared for these situations.
Okay.
But to me, the
But you would fight,
lethality,
but you wouldn't learn to fight.
I would potentially learn to fight. Yeah.
Okay.
Because to me, I don't have a problem with fighting. I have a problem with
Okay.
killing.
Right.
And
So
to
what
me,
if you're fighting somebody and they die, but did you sin because you killed them? Or it's not sin because it was an accident? Or you didn't think that fighting would be lethal? Or you didn't think fighting would potentially be lethal, so therefore it wasn't sin?
you have multiple choices to make. And I think it's safe to say that in most any situation, fighting is probably the least likely to be lethal versus knife or baseball bat or gun.
Okay, so you need to find
And in the
the least lethal option available.
No.
Okay.
These things happen quickly. Spur of the
Right.
moment, you react, you just kind of go into mode. But if you've trained yourself to go into mode with a lethal weapon, that's, to me, why did it need to be lethal? That's unnecessary, especially if you had the time to prepare for this in advance and you've been thinking about this. It's like, why a gun? I don't understand that.
So what counts as a lethal weapon?
I think a gun is a lethal weapon because most situations where someone's trying to hurt somebody and then someone else is trying to defend them with a gun usually ends with that person dying, the perpetrator.
I don't know if that's true.
But also in the heat of the moment, you're just probably just going to shoot in their direction. You're not going to say, oh, well, let me aim for their leg.
Correct.
Unless you're like a fantastic shot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe someone can do that. But to me, it's like you're just going to spring into action and go into defense mode. So to me, the likelihood of a bullet doing some serious damage to somebody, to me, it's like, it's not so believable to me that you could defend somebody with a gun and be like, oh, well, I didn't mean to kill them, right? That's not what I wanted to do. It's like, well, why didn't you choose a different tool then? It's like, this is definitely hyperbolic and probably, I'm not trying to make it sound silly, but it is a little silly. It's like if you walk around with a hand grenade and saying, I am carrying this and prepared to use it because I value protecting people. To me, it's not believable that you used a hand grenade to protect somebody. And it's like, well, I wasn't trying to kill them. It's like you brought a hand grenade. And to me, it's a similar thing with a gun. It's like you're carrying around a gun. What do you think was going to happen? To me, it's just like, really? You didn't think there was a good chance somebody would die from this? To me, it's just not that believable. So to me, it's like, why wouldn't you move?
Somebody dying is like, that would be sin for somebody to do that.
I think if you've had a lot of time to think and prepare and train for this situation and you chose a lethal option, then I think, yeah, you've had a lot of time to think about this and you probably should have made a better choice. Versus if you're in a situation and you didn't prepare for it and there happens to be a gun and you use it or something, I don't know, that might fall in the accidental bucket.
Okay.
But I just don't know that it could really ever fall in the accidental bucket if it's something you're carrying around with you. It's like, well, that wasn't accidental. You intended to have that with you for this type of situation.
Okay.
So that was your intended solution, regardless.
Yeah. And the bottom line for you is that there's a problem because somebody accidentally died, not that something bad, not that innocent people were protected.
Well, I think you can protect innocent people without having to kill the perpetrator. To me, that's unnecessary collateral damage. And it may happen, accidents happen, and not every situation you're going to protect people perfectly or hit them just in the right spot or whatever.
Right.
So I get that. There's room for that. However, if we're just going from like rational probability, it's like, you definitely could have chosen a less lethal option that was just as effective. So that's why I think of like a tranquilizer gun. I don't know. It's like it's got the same range, it's got the same function. It's inherently pretty much the same thing. And there's probably people who know more about it than I do and can point out some differences.
Yeah.
But it's like I would think that would be just as effective.
Okay.
I would imagine.
Just as effective as stopping someone.
As with a gun, a bullet gun.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Diego and Andrew, both know their Bibles very well. And so I just want to, put that out there, that these different viewpoints are coming from the same scriptures. And Diego, we mentioned some scriptures in the gun episode,
Yep.
Jesus's teachings. What do you draw from mostly in scripture that got you to this idea or opinion that killing is a sin if you are intentionally ready for it?
Yeah. I would say it's from a number of things Jesus has said, and it's from just kind of a more broad, I would say, eternal perspective from my part of just like, here's what matters at the end of the day, and this is what makes sense to me.
Makes sense to you as Diego?
Yeah,
Okay.
as like a Christian who's reading the Bible and trying to align my actions and life around all of what's in there. So I think one of the things you guys touched on, which Cole talked about, was the sword. Like, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. And I think, and you talked about how you could say those who live by violence will die by violence, and how that's an appropriate way to read it. And I think it is also fair to, kind of like Cole said, to read that as those who live by the gun will die by the gun. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying guns are inherently bad. I think guns for sport or for hunting are okay. They're tools. Mm-hmm. They're just not bad in and of themselves. But I think we're lying to ourselves if we're not saying they're specifically designed to kill. And swords are too. But I think people had a reason to carry swords in Jesus' day, because you're often walking through miles and miles of wilderness between towns, and some wild animal might attack you. And that's the same reason why people carried guns here when the nation was first established and colonized. It's like, this is pretty much woods, and nothing was established yet. So it was probably a normal occurrence, and likely that you would at some point face a bear or something. So having a gun to defend yourself made sense.
Against animals.
Against animals, yeah. And as a tool. And to me, a sword performs multiple functions. You can use it to cut fruit, branches, make a fire. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I see it as like a Swiss Army knife tool that people in Jesus' day carried with them. So it was a tool that you could do a lot of things with, versus guns today. It's just like, it's kind of only designed to do one thing, and that's to kill. Huh. And with a sword, you could very intentionally, swipe at a leg to try to stop somebody, versus you just don't have that option with a gun. You're just kind of shooting in their direction.
So with that being said, then, now that people do have guns,
yeah,
criminals,
sure,
why not level up to face the criminal with what they have?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, there's specific people with roles, so like police and National Guard, and to me that's legitimate. So that makes sense. But in terms of like the everyday person, to me, I would think we would all be pretty safe if 90% of Americans carried around tranquilizer guns. I don't see how that wouldn't nullify the problem. I understand that theirs is more lethal, but it doesn't mean that I need to be equally as lethal towards them. To me, if the goal is to protect people or to stop evil from happening, then it's just like, you can do that without killing them, or like in a much less intense, severe way. So to me, that's more of like a practical mindset of just like, I think it's a little like naive, or just like we're lying to ourselves going into it if we're saying, oh, well, we don't want to kill people with a gun. It's like, well, it's a gun. Like, what do you think was going to happen?
Well,
it just doesn't feel that believable.
I think there's a big mischaracterization there to say that if you carry a gun, you want to kill people.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Well, you said if we're lying to ourselves, or we're saying we don't want to kill people.
What I'm saying is, if you are carrying around a gun, it's because you're prepared to use it in a particular circumstance. And in that particular circumstance, you're willing to entertain the idea that it is okay to kill somebody.
Right. Should
that situation arise.
Right.
And to me, I'm saying, but if you can avoid it, then why wouldn't you?
100%.
Andrew, why can't we just all carry around tranquilizer guns?
Well, okay. I think that,
because I'm all for protecting people. I think that's great. But I'm just like, why does it need to be lethal?
Well, I mean, you're treating it like every gunshot is deadly, which is
way more deadly than
gross mischaracterization of that reality. That's just not true.
No, and that isn't true. But I'm just talking likelihood.
Well, again, I don't know that that's. I would say that that's not a fair way to even just look at gunshots. How often maybe like one gunshot equals one death.
Yeah.
I think that's I don't think that's a right or accurate way to look at that. I think that the mischaracterization I think there's a lot of mischaracterization there of culture and reality between swords and even the United States in the years, and why people throughout all of history have carried weapons. I don't agree. That's fine if you want to kind of articulate that characterization. I don't agree with that being an accurate representation of reality.
You think they carried weapons for people because of
For
enemies,
all the reasons.
For enemies.
I think everybody. I think all people have carried weapons for all the same reasons and all of time.
And I agree with you. They probably did, but I'm just saying, was it right that they did?
Right. And so I think
I'm with you.
Right,
I'm sure tons of people have carried guns because they
and swords and rocks and staffs and
all sorts of things.
And you name it.
All the things.
And fighting skills.
Sure.
Like, yeah. So there's that. Just as and whatever.
Worth clarifying.
Yeah. And so I mean, I hear what you're saying about all of this stuff. I think that you're saying, if you're carrying a gun, you've thought about there's a circumstance you'd use it, and you're willing to entertain the thought of killing someone.
Right.
And that's true. The context is to defend people. It's not for the sake of justifying killing somebody.
Right. That's I think a given assumption. But yes,
just want to make sure it's out there.
Yes.
But I think the same thing is true with any hand-to-hand combat skill.
Maybe.
Is that you are learning that, and you're prepared to do what needs to be done to protect whoever necessary in a certain situation. Mm-hmm. And we'll say it, the bad guy gets a vote in how that goes down.
Yeah, he does.
And that's true of any defense scenario.
Yes.
Is that the bad guy gets a vote in how this goes down. If you're going to break in the night, for example, it's like you are taking away defenders' options. You're making them more scared, they can see you
more
less,
surprised,
more tired, half as like you voted for all of these circumstances, so you get whatever
the higher ground in some senses.
Exactly. And so different situations warrant different actions, which I am 100% in favor of, which is why I'm totally in favor of holding people to account if they say that they were defending themselves, whether they used a gun, a knife, their hands, or whatever. It's like, if you killed somebody, there should be reasonable evidence to show that you weren't just trying to kill somebody. You weren't looking for a reason to just kill a bad guy.
But I just think if you prepared in advance with a gun, then it's like, well, you brought a gun.
Well, I guess I'm just saying it's that you could apply that logic to everything down to hand-to-hand combat.
And I would disagree, because I think hand-to-hand combat, there's a whole menu of do you do a hold? Do you do a punch? Do you do a kick? There's all these options of what you can do.
That also
and if you're someone who's
the bad guy, though,
and that's something
the vote, that if somebody is gonna, so that ignores all the things that are happening. So again, the scenario isn't just, is it okay? Like, can I just justify a reason to shoot somebody?
No,
I know you're not saying
that.
I know you're not saying that.
Totally.
I know that. I'm just saying that is, it's worth. I think it's just worth saying, because there are plenty of laws that are right and good about, like, for example, just because somebody's stealing from you doesn't mean you get to shoot them.
Right.
Like, self-defense isn't some blanket immunity from doing whatever damage you want to do to somebody. If they don't have a weapon, if they're just trying to take something from you, if, all kinds of different reasons can put a quote-unquote defender into the defendant's seat pretty quickly for being the one who murdered somebody. You didn't defend yourself, you murdered somebody. So, and I'm for all of that. So I'm not against the principle of, right response, reasonable and right response. I'm all for that. So I just think it's worth being said. So one of the things that I think is relevant to say is you've talked about right authority on some of this stuff, whether it's the
Sure.
police or the National Guard or the government or whatever. I would articulate the position that I think the individual is a right authority for himself and for his family, and has a responsibility to society, and that the government is not my primary protector or the protector of my family.
Yes.
They should be protecting my right to life, which means I have a right to defend myself. But more importantly, what we're talking about here is, we'll say, the innocent, the family, and to contribute to society in that way.
Yeah.
So that's why I think I'm with you on, I think right authority is necessary to do things.
Sure.
You shouldn't be running outside your lane. I would just articulate that as an expression of why an individual would be in his right authority to exercise defense.
And I guess when it just comes to your individual level, I'm not so concerned on the parameters of what the government says. I mean, I do, because I want to be a law-abiding citizen. But at the end of the day, what I'm concerned about is standing before God.
Right. But
so it's like, whether there's all these specifics, it's like, well, that's cool. But does God want me to kill someone? I don't think so. So I'm just going to stick with that regardless of the specifics.
Yeah. What you're saying is, does God want me to kill somebody? In certain instances, yes, when the right authority does it, whether it's war or capital punishment or the police.
But I'm going to let them do that.
Right. And so that's so you're saying God's given them authority to do that.
Yes.
And I think God's given the individual authority to do those
exactly
things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
To me, it's specific roles and positions, and to me, it's a lot of people are different than me, and a lot of people are okay carrying out that challenging work, and I'm thankful for them, because God gives parameters for that and gives space for that. Totally. I just would never want to be the person to do it. But to just kind of exercise that as an individual, to me, it doesn't feel wrong. I guess it's like, to me, what it comes down to, when I kind of talking about the good guy, bad guy thing.
Okay.
It's like, well, this person was trying to kill somebody with a gun with a bad reason, whether it was trying to hurt my family or they were in the church or whatever. Oh, but I was trying to kill that person because I had a good reason. It's like, how have we taken a situation where it's like they're killing someone and I'm killing someone, but we've phrased it in such a way where one is okay and one isn't? I'm like, that doesn't feel honest or consistent, or it just feels really nuanced to the details of the situation. And it's like, and then you kind of get into the nuanced details. Well, it's like, well, maybe it was justified. It's like, well, why? Well, they had a good reason. It's like, well, what's a good you know what I mean? And it's just like, then you get into motives and the motives of people's hearts, and you can't really know that.
Right.
But when you're answering to God at the end of the day, that's what I'm thinking about. And I want my heart to be right in that.
Totally.
And I'm not saying someone who defends someone, their heart is necessarily wrong. I don't know their heart. So again, that's not for me to judge. I understand it's a reality that people do it. It's going to happen. Christians are going to do it. And it's like, okay, that's really not for me to decide if that was okay or not okay. And I'm not interested in doing that. I'm just interested in living my life with integrity. And to me, it's weird that someone killing somebody would be bad, but me killing somebody in the same way would be okay. And I'm like, that just, what? How did we get there?
No, I hear what you're saying.
And to me, that's where we kind of talked about it being like a worldly idea. And that's kind of what I meant, was like, to me, it's like I think Cole said, a common sense idea. That's just like, regardless of culture or country or background, a lot of people around the world feel like they can defend themselves, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I meant by a worldly idea. It's just like, it's a very commonly held belief, but like, that doesn't mean God said that. Right. So to me, that doesn't really hold a lot of weight just because a lot of people think that.
Yeah. No, I hear that, and I think that's right logic. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't make it right.
Sure. I think that's a good starting place for anyone.
Exactly. I think just something I'm hearing that I would kind of push back on is like, it's wrong to kill somebody except in certain situations where how can we justify that?
Yeah.
But I guess I hear you justifying it in senses of capital punishment and war. So it is right to kill somebody in that sense, and so you're still justifying it in certain circumstances.
I think in the ones that are specifically pretty clear cut in Scripture, I'm like,
yeah.
And then I think it would be weird or dishonest for me to say that it's not okay, because it's like, well, I feel like it's pretty clear in the Bible that it's okay.
And I think to articulate a nuance that I think is relevant and I think is just ultimately just like an agree to disagree point, which I think is totally great, is I totally track with what you're saying on like, well, he's a bad guy trying to kill somebody, but you just killed somebody, but that's okay. Or like he wanted to kill somebody, but you wanted to, and that was bad, but you wanted to kill him, defender, so you're okay.
Wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I get where you're coming from, and I'm like, okay, I can see how you could see it that way. I think the way that I would say is the way that I can't unsee it also. Like I see how you can see it that way and not unsee it that way.
Sure.
I think the way that I would say it, and again, I think this is just an agree to disagree thing. It's like, all right, great, fair enough. Is like the bad guy wanted to kill somebody. The good guy wanted to defend people.
Yes.
And
to me, that's great.
Yes.
That should always
and then
be
you're
the case.
taking the next step to say, and if it's a gun, you can't tell me that you weren't trying to kill somebody.
To me, it's just if the whole gun thing, the thing that's so specific about guns is that people specifically leave the house and carry them with them. It's kind of unique in that sense. And in Jesus' day, that was probably a sword or a knife of sorts. So to me, it's like you've thought about this, you've bought this, you've practiced with this. Like if this much planning has gone into it, like how did you not see that you picked a pretty lethal option? You know what I mean? And that's like, if the goal is to protect people, you can do the job with something a little, I don't know if safer is the word, but just like, why did that, I mean, that's a bad dude for sure, but why do they need to die? And like good guy, bad guy to me is a very human way to see things, because scripture's kind of like, no one's good. So it's like for me to have some type of perspective that guy had a bad reason he's bad, and I'm good because I had a good reason because I was trying to protect people, and that's a good thing. It's like, I don't know. It just feels kind of like a loose, and it kind of feels like self-justification. It's like, oh, it's bad when they do it, but when I do it. And it's like, obviously the circumstances and reasons are different, but it's like, we're kind of articulating nuance that's like, oh, this little detail now makes the thing that was not okay. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. I feel like we're kind of dancing on a line there.
You're seeing the thing as the same thing, where I'm saying I see it as two totally different actions.
Sure. Yeah, one is planned and maybe calculated, and one is a response to that thing. But to me, it's...
Well, you're seeing it as one action. Someone's killing somebody.
If, assuming both perpetrator and defender are using a gun, then probably. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, right. You're seeing that as somebody killed somebody. And they were... The bad guy and quote-unquote good guy were both attempting to do the same action, and one of them succeeded.
Right.
Okay,
that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, so that's how you're seeing it, which I'm like, okay, great. I can see you seeing it that way. I think I'm seeing as two people were trying to do two totally different things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But they both used a gun, they pulled the trigger, and someone died.
Yes.
So to me, that's where I see it as the same. And I feel like the protector scenario just doesn't cut it, because to me it seems like a juvenile argument, like, oh, well, he started it. I only did it because he was doing it. I was only defending. And to me, it's just like, well, we don't buy that from our kids.
Well, you would fight, you would fight the guy, and that wouldn't be juvenile.
Why would it be juvenile? Oh, saying they started it. Well, no, because I'm not trying to kill him. But I'm saying if it gets to the point where someone gets killed, and it's like, well, if you're saying, well, it's okay that they killed because he started it and he had it coming, or what did he think was going to happen, or those who live by the gun will die by the gun. So that's what he chose. All those sorts of ideas.
Okay.
So I'm gonna bring this question back around.
Hey, Brooke, you're still here.
I know. Sorry. Hi.
No, I like it.
Because you didn't answer it, Andrew.
Oh.
Why not use tranquilizers?
Oh, man. I think there's a zillion reasons why not to use tranquilizers.
Give us the top three.
The top three is that bad guys aren't using tranquilizers. And that's like the top 100 reasons, I think. Yeah. That reason is the top 100 reasons that can spin off into a whole bunch of different ways. Okay. And it doesn't really work. I mean, there's a reason why, like no police department uses tranquilizers, because they don't work. They have other, like, less lethal options, but that's not like a less lethal option that has proven its effectiveness.
Like a
in any
taser
way.
is what they would use.
I mean, sometimes
In terms of the immediacy of being able to stop somebody, probably.
yeah, and tranquilizers are
because it has
not
to
immediate.
probably enter the bloodstream. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure,
Right.
sure, I understand that.
Yeah.
And I just use that as an example, but I'm saying like we're a very, very high-tech society and world at this point. It's like surely there's options. It may not be a tranquilizer gun. There's probably, I'm sure there's reasons why people don't use them because they probably suck in some ways.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry for the language.
Right.
But so I understand that. But I'm just kind of saying like there surely is other options.
If there was, don't you think people would use them?
I would hope so, but I think we've just fallen so heavily on the gun thing, and I just don't know that it's needed. I think it's a little overkill of a solution.
Because you're assuming there's a better solution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why
Okay,
not?
Diego, I have a question for you now. So, and this is going to be hypothetical.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put you in a corner, but somebody breaks in with a gun, your family is at home, or say you're somewhere else, and there
Can
happens.
I say one thing real quick? Back to the tranquilizer
Yeah.
thing. We have to, you're giving him context on a certain situation, and I think that the tranquilizer question deserves context as well.
Okay.
Like
Like a hypothetical?
yeah, like a tranquilizer versus gun.
Yeah, and that's what
just
I
to
was
be
proposing,
clear.
like a 1-to-1, apples to apples,
exactly.
identical scenarios, gun
I'm
versus
not saying
tranquilizer gun.
don't use a tranquilizer against somebody, just a bad guy. He's standing over there. He's not armed. Nobody's in immediate danger. We're
Sure,
just trying to
totally.
figure out how to
Okay.
get this guy asleep, but nobody wants to go up and talk to him. Okay, great. Tasers, tranquilizers, those sorts of things.
Yes.
No, like in
I'm
the
talking
moment
about
somebody's in danger.
Like gunfight.
What are you going to do?
Don't
Yeah.
bring a tranquilizer to a gunfight.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. And my question was more not specific for you, just more
Right.
like why wouldn't somebody carry a
Right.
tranquilizer as opposed to a gun?
And I think that's the point, is because you don't bring a tranquilizer to a gunfight.
Yeah. Yeah. Heard. Yeah. So Diego, somebody breaks in with a gun,
Mm-hmm.
your family is there. There happens to be a gun on the counter and you would not use it, just to clarify. You would not pick it up.
I mean, why is it there? I wouldn't have a gun in my house, especially not on the counter where the kids can reach it.
This is hypothetical.
But it would never happen.
I'm just saying when push comes to shove.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You would not go
I
there.
probably wouldn't default towards it. I probably wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay.
Because like if
wanna play with the
my
hypothetical?
if my goal
We're
is
in the
to
same
be
place. Guy comes in with a gun. He shoots me. My gun falls on the floor. That's why the gun's there. There.
if it falls on the floor, it probably fell near you. So before
Right.
I can get it, he's got me. Anyway,
Okay.
I probably wouldn't default to it in most any situation, I would say. And it's not because I think guns are evil, but I'm just like, it just seems unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
And if the goal, to me, it's like, if your goal is to like, what is the best way to stop somebody? I get how you would go to gun because it's pretty darn effective.
Right.
But I just don't see that as the goal at the end of the day. It's like,
Stopping someone?
What's your goal at the end of the
What's
day?
the goal?
my goal is to act with integrity. So it's like, to me, if you are truly intending to protect people, that's a great thing. But if it's not in a lethal manner, you know what I mean? Like,
No, I don't.
what?
No, go ahead.
So like to me, it's like, yes, you can think about the effectiveness of how to take someone out. But to me, it's like, I want to act integrity by springing into action when people need to be protected, but also not doing something that's likely going to end in someone dying. To me, I'm trying to balance the tension between those two things,
Right.
which is why I would favor a non-lethal thing. So to answer your question, I probably wouldn't take the gun. I also probably wouldn't know if the safety was on or wasn't on. So to me, that's just another complication that it's practically not a good choice when you
Yeah.
need to make a snap decision.
Do you think overarching, you rest on your trust that God has it under control no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the outcome is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth clarifying what that means. Because being under control doesn't mean the thing I wanted to happen always happens, or
Right.
that I'm always kept safe. And I know that it's a nasty world out there, and there's plenty of bad people that use guns, and that's a very real scenario that I could get killed or my family could get killed. And to me, that is tragic, unfortunate, wasn't the heart of God, but it doesn't mean that it was okay for me to kill somebody. To me, it's like they're both true. Like, that was all not okay, but it also makes it like, why would it just suddenly be okay for me to? Because, like, yes, do we want to act in righteousness and justice? Like, absolutely, we should do that. But it's not our place to try to prevent every tragic thing from happening in the world. And I think I kind of mentioned an eternal perspective before. What I meant by that is just kind of more so like the eternal destination of the people involved. And kind of in Psalm 116, it says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of the saints. That's a really interesting verse to me. And there's other scriptures like in Ezekiel 33, 31, somewhere in late Ezekiel, where he talks about like, essentially, do I enjoy it when a wicked person dies? No. And to me, when I hold those two together, it's like, okay, God mourns when a wicked person dies, and he rejoices when a saint dies. And to me, that makes sense, because when you look at things from an eternal perspective, at the end of the day, if the situation was one person was going to die and it was going to be me or them, if I die, I go to heaven. If they die, their eternal hell has begun. And I think that's the kind of perspective I hold at the end of the day. It's like, what's the net gain or value here, whether it's for me or for somebody else? And I don't know that I could live with the thought of having pulled the trigger on somebody and knowing that my actions started their eternal hell. Like, obviously, they went to hell because of how they chose their life and rejecting Jesus and all the things. That was completely on them. But, like, it was within my free will to decide whether or not I was going to kill that person in that moment. And to me, that just terrifies me to think. To me, it's like it's too much power for a person to have. And it's a power that people do have and exercise all the time. And for better or for worse. And I think mostly for worse. There's a lot of tragic things that happen in the world. But to me, the best case scenario is I go to heaven and die with integrity and didn't kill a person and send them to hell. You know, I didn't send them to hell, but you know what I'm saying. Similarly, I used to have a lot of fears about dying and a whole lot of different scenarios. That's a whole other conversation. And I'm free from a lot of that now, thankfully, and I've been delivered from stuff. But even there was times where I was learning to drive and I was nervous to drive on the interstate. And I was like, oh, what if I die in a car accident? Mm-hmm. And just kind of one day, it just kind of struck me as I was driving in traffic. It's like, okay, if somebody dies in traffic today from a car accident, best case scenario is it's someone who knows Jesus. So it's actually kind of the better thing to happen if it were me than for some other people. And that's how I started looking at it. And it's just like, Jesus said, those who try to preserve their lives will lose it. And obviously he's not talking about self-defense there.
Okay.
That's, he's talking about being a disciple and
right.
dying to self and, but it's something that like, there's multiple things that Jesus says that I just really take to heart. And I feel like makes perfect sense to me when I think of this. And it's just like, innocent people dying is bad. It's not great, but it's just how things are in this world. Kind of like you said, war is just a reality of the life that we live in. And I think same as people dying and murder. And I think it's a bummer. There's no way getting around that. But it's like, but I'm at peace with me dying. And it's really bad. And or my loved ones or whatever, because it's just like, that really was hard, but God will be with me in it.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Andrew, anything to wrap up?
No, it's great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening.
That's all for today's honest conversation. We'll see you back here next Wednesday.